Tonight on First Tuesday.
The only thing I can think of is here we are in World War II again in the Battle of Pearl Harbor.
The suicide bomb that killed over 200 Marines and still casts a shadow over American foreign policy.
My difference with the Secretary of Defense was whether we should be there at all, and he didn't want to be there.
Good evening. Television coverage of the world's civil wars can set a trap for politicians. A United States president whose public is moved by pictures of suffering will feel called upon to do something. But what? With 16 areas of such conflict in the former Soviet bloc alone, maybe it's time to establish the rules. Do you send in troops? Which ones? How many? And to do what? To keep the peace or to enforce it? Often, it's an impossible task. Take Somalia, where United States helicopters shot dead over 60 Somalis, including women and children, in an incident last month. How could a humanitarian mission come to this? Tensions increased in the last 2 days in Somalia, where 12 US soldiers have been killed. But last night, President Clinton still insisted he would not cut and run. That's exactly what the United States said a decade ago in Lebanon, when President Reagan sent in the Marines to, as he put it, restore the peace. Shouldn't lessons have been learned then about the price that's paid when you simply follow the flag?
Separated by 5,000 miles, two groups of fighting men are on parade. At the Iwo Jima Memorial in Washington, D.C., the United States Marine Corps performs its silent drill. In the southern suburbs of Beirut, the fighters of Hezbollah, the Party of God, honor the martyrs of their war against the West. The Americans were part of a multinational force sent into Beirut in August 1982. What started as a peacekeeping mission ended in disaster. More than 200 US Marines were slaughtered here in their sleep by a Hezbollah suicide bomber. It was the largest loss of life for the Marines since World War II.
It took some time to realize that it actually had happened. It's kind of scary to even think that it was so devastating as it was. There was 23 people in my platoon. Only 3 of the 20 that were actually inside the building made it out.
In 1982, Lebanon was in the throes of a bloody civil war that had lasted for 7 years. Thousands of Syrian troops had occupied the north of the country. Israel had invaded from the south, and by August, Israeli troops stood on the outskirts of Beirut, encircling thousands of PLO fighters trapped in the city. A multinational peacekeeping force, including the Marines, was sent into Beirut to prevent further bloodshed by escorting the PLO out of the country. Days later, the Americans were back on their ships. In the Marines' absence, a shocking massacre took place of 800 Palestinian civilians in the Sabra and Shatila refugee camps. News of the massacre shook the US government. There was bitter disagreement about what to do next.
I thought we should not go in, again, not because of the massacre or anything of that kind, but because we didn't have any defined mission.
There was a mission. The mission was to help the Lebanese get stability, first in Beirut and then throughout their country, and be able to provide a credible government there.
And so you had this most dangerous of all situations. You put your forces in without any kind of mission, without any kind of knowledge of when the matter ends, without any specific goal to be achieved, and just to stay there. And that, I thought, was imposed a terrible risk on our troops, and I argued consistently before and after the decision was made to go in the second time that we shouldn't be there and that we should get out.
My difference with the Secretary of Defense was whether we should be there at all, and he didn't want to be there. And I felt that we had an important role to play in Beirut and Lebanon, and the President agreed with me. The President felt we should have an important role, and so it was the President's decision, not my decision, to do the things that we did.
One of those who served in Beirut was Jeff Young. He came from a small town in New Jersey where his family had lived for 5 generations.
We were married in 1960, and we had 2 sons. Jeff was the firstborn, and he was born in July, and he would have been 33 this July. And I'm sure Jeff would have planned his life around what he would have been able to do after he got out of the service, and he would have planned his life here. I don't think he really had any thoughts of going anywhere else. He was happy here. I didn't have any problem with him going to Beirut. He wanted to go. He was looking forward to going. And several of the fellows had assigned themselves for another 6 months just so they could all go together.
The 24th Marine Amphibious Unit arrived in Beirut in late May 1983. They were replacements for other Marines who were going home.
That morning, we were looking at the coast. We were just right in the front of the boat looking at it. We were on a landing craft. Wasn't many words said. Nodded at each other, this is it, It was like a landing. I mean, a real Marine landing is, different than training. And I said, man, this is, I think of my father being in the war and him talking about things and what it was like, and my brother. And now I was doing it. And I had, this pride, it's like I'm doing the job I was trained to do.
And you'd get the high five from the kids, or you'd get thumbs up or the peace sign and smiles. So I felt very comfortable. I felt a privilege being there, being a peacekeeper.
The idea was to go out and show the flag, let the public see you. And it was a good feeling. It was a proud feeling, so to speak. You almost felt invincible. You almost felt like the big guy on the block.
But the Marines soon learned that the peacekeepers had become targets as well.
Sitting in Lebanon with nothing to do, just listen to the arty and the sniper shots too. Once in a while when it's really slow, we hear the EOD really let one blow. Off in the distance hear the rifle shots go. So we get in our bunkers and we keep our heads low. We got the Israelis out in front of our lines, sitting and waiting for the end of time. The Syrians are staying on top of the hill, just hanging around for someone to kill. Neither one will leave till the other ones do. So we're sitting here in Lebanon singing the blues.
Our mission was peacekeepers. I have never, even to this day, ever been trained as a peacekeeper. I was a combat Marine. I was a grunt for my whole time in.
As a drill instructor now, I teach recruits every day to be aggressive. Everything is go, 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 attack.
Target! T-72's direct front! Frontal! Gun 1 on my command! Gun 2 in impact!
Then we get there and we're sitting there being shot at and we can't do anything about it.
You're highly vulnerable because of the mission you're there, that you have, a peacekeeping mission, essentially in a place where there really wasn't any peace.
Towards the end of August, things started getting a little shaky. We were in the impact area. The factional fighting had picked up.
Were there any flashes from it, and did they correspond with the incoming at Charlie Company's position?
Like one of them pajama things, you know?
The atmosphere had changed quite a bit, and this feeling of hostility was increasing.
Hey, Petrie! You see him up there? You see him up there? Where? Straight out in front of us. That building with the orange curtain on it. It's to the left of it.
We started taking runs. We started taking casualties. I was very concerned. We took killed in action. We took wounded, and it kept getting progressively worse.
Being in a foxhole or in a bunker, and it was frustrating because you could feel the ground shaking around you. You'd hear the whistling of the rounds incoming, and there was nothing that you could do about it.
And I remember the frequency of running out day and night, just sitting there, no one firing back, taking these rounds, taking these bullets, saying, is this going to increase and become worse? We just didn't know. And when you don't know, you become more frazzled, more nervous, more frustrated. So the Marines began to recognize this is not a good spot, and the morale took a heavy hit.
As the shell fire intensified, more Marines were moved into a large, reinforced concrete building on the perimeter of Beirut International Airport. The battalion landing team headquarters was known as the BLT. Such a heavy concentration of men in one area was contrary to military doctrine. It was a decision criticized later.
I had absolutely no choice that I had to bring the Marines that were exposed in tents and in open areas between runways at the airport as much as I could, bring them into hardened facilities, for better word, and that BLT building that eventually was the target of the bomb, to move them in there. I simply had no choice because I had no other place to put them.
If you were looking at the building, I was in the front part of the building at the top left corner of the building. 12 to 18 of us slept in that room, but the building had no electricity and no running water.
As the mission continued, distrust of the Marines increased among the warring factions. The U.S. forces were supplying and training the largely Christian army of President Amin Jamal, which was at war with Muslim and Druze militias. On September the 19th, American forces became directly involved in a battle to save a key strategic point overlooking Beirut. The village of Souk el-Khab, held by the Lebanese army, was being attacked by Druze fighters. US warships anchored offshore were ordered to fire on Drew's positions.
I knew the minute we started down that path of providing direct support to the Lebanese army, you don't turn back. That's a slippery slope you start going down, the same as responding. And it just was contrary to the mission. And it clearly was a milestone event on our commitment over there that I felt we became another militia afterward.
Yes, of course, we did welcome them, and the French and the Italians, of course, but suddenly their policy changed and they were involved stupidly in the civil war that started. Why the Italians were not involved in the fighting? The Italians were much more clever. Even the French tried to stay away. The Americans, I don't know why, were involved. The Lebanese army was backed at that time by the Americans, and they had a signature with the Israelis, our enemies. So we had to find somebody to support us. Yes, we were supported by the Syrians and by the Soviet Union, and we were proud of it.
I know this whole war was dirty. It shouldn't have started at the first place. But it started, and instead of helping, one faction against the other, it should have helped, to stop the whole thing. They were shelling out there. My house was hit. My auntie was killed.
The American people were told that they were a peacekeeping force. This was propaganda. We lived through the real story. We paid the price and suffered the consequences. Their actions were contrary to their claims. They were bombarding the people. And if the American people do not believe that, let them bring experts to see the places that were destroyed. We say that the American people are innocent like our people. They surely don't like to hurt the Lebanese people.
The attacks on the Marines left a clear message. They were no longer welcome as peacekeepers.
And I think they basically were trying to, their way of saying, hey, it's time for you to go. Leave us alone. We've been fighting for 200, 300, 500 years here. You don't know what you do. You don't belong here. And I think they started just taking these little pot shots and testing us. And they did. And they got away with quite a bit.
When we've taken, direct hits here and gotten people hurt, there've been some people who've been pretty upset by it, but I think that's always going to be the case on the whole.
Condition 1 occurred almost every day. So they put a couple of our guns up on the roof of the BLT building. I remember one night in particular, sitting behind the sandbags and hearing these rounds going. I had wet pants that night, for the first time in my life, I have never been so scared. I wet my drawers. I was that scared because any one of those rounds could have taken that whole corner of that building out.
More and more Marines used to come with various reasons. They were scared. Their buddies were just wounded. They were thinking about homes now. They were thinking about families, wives, their children.
One of those who became increasingly worried was Sergeant David Battle. 2 days before the bombing, he was baptized.
I truly feel that in his heart he felt unsure. I think that that he felt that something was amiss. And that bothers me to this day, that he was unsure about his safety. Not just his safety, the safety of his men. Fear is terrible. When you fear for your life and for the life of your troops, and he felt like he was responsible for his troops.
Back in Washington, D.C., Secretary of Defense Weinberger and the Joint Chiefs of Staff recognized the danger the Marines were in. They argued for them to be pulled back to their ships for safety.
I did warn constantly of the dangers of this kind of thing and how unwise it was, and literally begged each meeting that I attended to get them out of there. At least, at the very least, to put them back on ships and get them off the land in a place where, if anything should develop, we could be reinserted. But to no avail, because it was always argued by those of us who, in our government, who wanted to keep them there, that this would be cutting and running and Marines never retreated and various other nonsensical slogans that, that had no meaning in this kind of a situation.
The president was worried about cutting and running. That was not a slogan. It's a problem if people see you in the face of opposition, see you cut and run. That's not some slogan. That is something that hurts you badly. And the fact that in the end it appeared that that's more or less what we did has hurt us in the Middle East. Even to this day, people remember that.
In letters home, the Marines told about the undeclared war they were fighting. Lance Corporal John Buckmaster wrote frequently to his parents in Vandalia, Ohio.
We watched the news because he was there, and the news didn't show anything great going on over there. But from his letters, you could tell that there was action and shooting. And from what he was saying in the letters did not coincide with what the news was saying.
I really didn't worry till we got this letter that we received from John, and it almost read like a last will and testament. Dad and Mom, howdy. Well, as you know, we have had some really intense fighting today, and it hasn't stopped yet. If anything should happen, and I was to be killed. And he goes on to explain what he wanted done with his things. And the most what would get to you the most, what would get to any parents. And it says, also, I have told Sharon, and Sharon was his fiancée, he was planning to come home to be married, that I want you to have my set, I told Sharon that I want you to have my set of dress blues. Here he's speaking to his father. It's the only thing that I have which I can show the love and respect I have for you. A Marine's gift to another Marine, okay? I'm not going to be a hero. I'll be careful. And he always signed his letters. I'll be careful, Dad. I'll keep my head down. He says, I promise. He says, I'm coming home. I love you both very much. Your son, and damn proud of it, John. So, he came home in a flag-draped coffin.
was a sergeant of the guard the morning of the Beirut bombing. I had a little guard shack, which is like a little ticket booth, located right at the entrance to the lobby of the BLT headquarters building. It was Sunday morning. Birds chirping, you could hear the normal, everyday Sunday sounds, which were quiet. Sundays was a day of rest for us. Everybody was sleeping. There was no reveille on a Sunday. And then I heard the rev of an engine. It sounded like our 6-bys, which is our 5 10-ton trucks. The whine of a diesel engine sound. I heard that to my rear. And it caused me, it got my attention in such a way that it just caused me to kind of turn, and I looked over my left shoulder to my rear. And I saw a big yellow, maybe 8, 10-ton truck. And the driver had a beard and a mustache, and I can't remember the clothing too well. It might have been camouflage utilities or something. But the driver had a shit-eating grin on his face. Just like that, he had a smile on his face. And right at that instant, something snapped. I don't know what happened. Something snapped in me, and I just immediately turned and ran directly through the lobby. And as I ran through, I remember yelling 2 or 3 times to hit the deck, hit the deck. I screamed it as loud as I could.
I sat down at a desk that had my back to the window to clean my rifle. Approximately about 6:20, right around 6:22, somewhere in that area. I heard Sergeant Russell, who was sergeant of the guard that night, shouting down in the inside of the building. Since the core of the building was hollow from the roof to the floor, you could hear somebody shouting down there. I knew it was Sergeant Russell. I knew that something was happening, so I began to place my rifle back together, and I was yelling for the people in my team to get up.
And I probably got another 30, 35 feet and looked back over my shoulder at the truck again. At this instant that I look back now, the truck, you could see it had just stopped. It just stopped, settled. The engine was dead. There wasn't a sound, not a movement out of the cab. Everything was dead silent. To this day, I say I could have heard a pin drop in that lobby. It was that quiet at that instant in time. And then within a second, I saw a bright yellow-orange flash at the lower right of the grill of that truck. A big flame seemed to just start there. It started right there and just went right up and covered the driver's side, just covered the cab, right? And just that quick, I felt heat and a wave of concussion, a powerful slap, and that's all I remember.
Then there was a bright orange flash. I never heard anything. And the next thing I knew, it was pitch black, and I felt like I was floating through the air. Then I began to see shafts of light, and I looked up over my head, and I could see the ground rushing toward me, so I tried to turn over, and I ended up landing on my feet 3 stories below.
As I turned the corner and looked at the building, I was looking up to look at the building. There was no building. This 4-story structure was leveled. And I remember looking at this, saying, this has to be a nightmare. This is unbelievable. Silence, nothing.
There were bodies everywhere. There were body parts. I looked up into the trees, and there were some people and bodies impaled into the tree with the branches going through them. There were concrete pillars on top of people. I remember there was this one corporal that worked in the headquarters company, and he was a little bit down in the crater, and he was yelling for help. I walked over to where he was at, and he had this this concrete pillar on his lap, which was about 3 feet by 3 feet, and it was about 20 feet long. And you know, he was yelling for help. I went over there and tried to move the concrete pillar. I couldn't, so I told him that I'd go back and try and get help.
By the time the smoke cleared enough to see, all I could see was a large pile of rubble. You could hear voices in the rubble. I went back to just try to find someone, anybody, help anybody I could. But with the injuries I sustained, I really couldn't dig the way it would take to get people out.
I woke up. It was like a dream. I kept saying to myself I had to get my truck and go home. Just give me a minute. I kept saying to myself I had to get up. It was dark. I said, I gotta get my truck and go home, you know. And I opened my eyes, and there was a Marine who like lifted something off of my face. I mean, 'cause I guess he was right there, pulling something off my face. And I looked at him and I said, "What happened?" He goes, "Well, I need to get some help."
I just started taking my oils out, put the stove around, and I just started doing last rites to anybody I could see. And there were people in all kinds of precarious situations. How we found them was a great distraught to me, a great emotional distraction to me, how these people were caught unawares. And the only thing I could think of was, here we are in World War II again, in the Battle of Pearl Harbor. Sunday morning, early morning, where people are asleep, no way of defending themselves. Who would do such a thing? Who would do such a thing to peacekeepers?
20 seconds after the attack on the Marines, the barracks of the French paratroopers was also bombed with heavy loss of life.
They got up to the infirmary, they took me inside, they placed me up against the wall on my cot, tagged me. It was mayhem. The bodies were coming in pieces, whole, dead and alive. I remember at one point being there pretty conscious the whole time and watching them bring all these different individuals in. And I remember distinctly a moan to my rear, over my head. I heard a cry. It was a very unusual moan that really caught my attention and caused me to raise my head and look. And it was a black Marine with he had no back. He was laying on his stomach, and all I could see was ribs. He didn't make it, obviously.
The death toll of the bombing of the American barracks was 241. The French lost 59 men in the attack on their compound. dozens of wounded Marines from the bombing were evacuated to US military hospitals in Germany.
I woke up again to prettiest green eyes you ever saw in your life. It was a nurse, Patty Marks. I opened my eyes, and her eyes always stick with me today. She's my lifesaver. And she told me that the commandant was there to see me and some other people, and if I felt like talking. And I tried to speak, I couldn't.
I said, "This is General Kelly, the commandant. How are you doing?" And of course, he couldn't speak and he couldn't see. And I think he thought that I was kind of kidding with him, so he grabbed me.
So I reached up, grabbed his collar, because I knew, General, commandant is going to have 4 stars. And I grabbed him and just 1, 2, 3, 4. And I knew it was him.
He started to motion with his finger, and we weren't quite sure what he wanted to say, but the nurse brought over his chart and put a pencil in his hand, and young Jeff Nashton wrote Semper Fi. Semper Fi is an abbreviation for Semper Fidelis, which is our motto in the Marine Corps, which is always faithful.
He understood what Semper Fi meant. I understood what it meant, and all the Marines knew what it meant. And that's who it was for. It was for me to him.
The Marines who died in the bombing were flown back to America via Germany.
Someone said that there was a C-141 airplane that had landed a short time before, and it was loaded with caskets of Marines. I said I want to go see it. I went over, and I don't think anybody could ever see a C-141 loaded with 144 caskets and not be moved. It was like somebody hit me over the head with a baseball bat.
When the president got the news and thought about it for the moments that we were there together, he was angry, and he said, "We've got to find who these bastards are and get them." And he meant it. The president directed that we devote a maximum effort with our overhead satellite collection, our eavesdropping, our human collection, and we conducted the most massive search I've ever seen to try to identify any piece of evidence that might help determine just who had done it.
An FBI team of forensic scientists was sent out to Beirut. Deep in the crater of the wreckage of the BLT, they found the axle of a 19-ton Mercedes truck.
I started, along with a survey crew, to start measuring distances of glass breakage, deaths, where people had been thrown, eardrum breakage, all the factors that would go in to try to determine how much explosives that had been used. The first time that we came up with an estimate, I said, no, can't be this much. It's impossible. And the more that we worked in this regard, the more positive that we were becoming, that this was the biggest bomb that we had ever seen, and actually we had never heard of one ever being this large that had been used, say, outside of a test or outside of a nuclear weapon.
Thurman and his colleagues determined that at least 12,000 pounds of explosive had been used to destroy the Marine barracks. US intelligence focused its attention here on the Bekaa Valley, It concluded the bombing had been the work of Hezbollah, a previously unknown group of Lebanese Muslim extremists backed by Iran.
All of us were quite moved by photographic evidence of a mock-up training site that was analogous in virtually every respect to the site actually hit. And this mock-up site in the Bekaa Valley, involving a road, a turnoff, a building structure, gave us very high confidence that that had been the rehearsal area for the conduct of the attack.
In Hezbollah's strongholds in Lebanon, it honors the martyrs of its jihad, or holy war. Its leaders hold the West responsible for the years of bloodshed in their country. But Hezbollah has never admitted responsibility for the bombings.
والأمريكيون حينما جاءوا عام 82 مع الغزو الإسرائيلي للبنان.
In 1982, the Americans accompanied the Israeli invasion with the hope of achieving their long-term aim to gain power in Lebanon. The Israeli invasion was part of this project, and the political trend to support the Americans at that time contributed towards this scheme. All those who stood against the Israeli invasion and against the presence of the multinational forces were aiming to destroy the American ploy. So the Americans were not purveyors of peace in Lebanon. They were behind all the strife and destruction. They were the real murderers of the Lebanese people. And they were the ones behind the conflict that lasted more than 17 years in Lebanon. The people of Lebanon have the right to confront this new colonial power and challenge it, and to wage war against it. The blowing up of the Marines' headquarters and other actions are manifestations of such a war.
Most Lebanese people do not support the extremist aims of Hezbollah, but neither did they see the Americans as peacekeepers. The bombardment by US warships, which had begun more than a month before the bombing of the BLT, increased in intensity afterwards. In February 1984, a small village called Tibiet was bombarded by more than 100 shells from the World War II battleship New Jersey.
The New Jersey, 1.25 tons, the weight of there, that's what I hear. Why? What did we do? What did they gain? They only harmed us. 1 person was killed. 28 persons were badly wounded. So why?
When we got some heavy shells, heavy bombs from the New Jersey, I don't know what kind of rules of engagement you are speaking about. I don't know. Why did their sons die in Lebanon? Why did so many sons, American sons, died in Vietnam, now maybe in Somalia? I don't know why. They have to ask their government, their president, their advisors. We are really sorry for their sons, but also they have to think about our sons. Thousands of us died.
I felt, and still feel, these absurdities that this small American presence, part of a multinational presence that was equally small and basically not sized or armed for the tasks that might be required to ensure their survival, were being kept in these very dangerous places. So yes, you get a mounting sense of frustration, and ultimately, when the expected happens, a sense of horror that stays with you, I suppose, permanently.
A memorial service for the dead servicemen was held at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, home of the Marines.
It was just a tragic thing. The president was immediately determined, however, that we were not going to be deterred from our mission in Lebanon by this terrorist attack, as we viewed it. And while, once again, there was a lot of objection from the Pentagon, the president was immediately saying, no, we're not going to be run out of there. And we redeployed Marines and defended them adequately, and they stayed for another 3 or 4 months.
Today, 10 years on, Esther and Ali Buckmaster still mourn the death of their son, John. They regularly travel from their home in Ohio to North Carolina to visit the Beirut Memorial.
If you talk to someone and talk about, my son being killed in Beirut, they don't remember Beirut. And a lot of people don't remember the bombing. That memorial is just beautiful. It's they couldn't have done a better job. It's just beautiful. It does bring comfort. It's the knowledge that that memorial is there and that he won't be forgotten.
You say, why did this happen? Who did this? It's not going to bring my son back. John's one of, 240-some names? I'll meet them someday, and I'll be with John again someday.
I haven't been for years. I haven't been for 5 years or so now. Since the day that they dedicated the statue at the memorial. It tears me apart to look at the names and to feel the wall and to want to sit there and talk to them. I think I'd just like to join them. I wish I could see them again. We had some good times. We had some bad times. But we were close. We were a team. And it's hard to lose just that quick. It's hard. It's hard to lose them just that quick. I wish they were here.
You can stand alone or with somebody else, or stand with all of us together. If you can believe in something bigger than yourself, you can follow the flag forever. They say it's just a dream, a dreamer's dream. but it's an empty thing that really has no meaning. They say it's all a lie, but it's not a lie. I'm gonna follow the flag till I die. Into every life a little rain must fall, but it's not gonna rain forever. You can rise above, you can rise above it all. We will follow the flag together. We will follow the flag forever.
Ten years on, it's still painful for those American families to remember. But at least 100,000 Lebanese have died in the conflict, and the suffering goes on for their families too. Theirs is a tragic situation and a complex one, like so many conflicts around the world. Difficult questions which deserve more than just another easy answer. First Tuesday, we'll be back in November. Until then, good night.